Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide for Turn 9 of the Binding Coil of Bahamut, aka the second Coil of Bahamut Turn 4. In this video, we will cover the strategy our team used to win, including responsibilities, positioning, and of course, boss abilities. Before defeating Turn 9, I highly recommend each player, especially the DPS, obtain a weapon of at least item level 100 or higher. There are many tight DPS checks in this fight, but really having better weapons is the most important thing. Average item level is not as big here. Turn 9 consists of a single enemy, Nail, Deus, Darnus, as well as a number of additional enemies across the phases. In order to have 100% accuracy, I recommend 513 accuracy for tanks, 492 for physical DPS, except for bards, who I recommend get the tank requirement for special reasons, and then 488 to 491 for summoners, and 470 accuracy for black mages. When the encounter begins, you will be placed on a 13-minute enrage timer for the fight. At 13 minutes, the boss will jump to the center of the room and perform Mega Flare, dealing 30,000 damage to everyone in the raid. Phase 1 begins when you engage the boss and will continue until Nail reaches 65%. You want to clear this phase in approximately 3 minutes to be on track to beat the fight's enrage timer. Additionally, the edge of the arena becomes deadly, instantly killing anyone it touches. Darnus has several standard boss attacks during this phase. His first one is Raven's Claw, which is a conal AoE in front of him that deals about 4,000 to 5,000 damage to anyone hit, including tanks. He also possesses Raven's Beak, which is his tank killing move. The initial hit can deal anywhere from 3,000 to 7,000 damage without defensive cooldowns, Eloquium, or Stone Skin, so all three of those things should be up for that initial hit. Additionally, it places a debuff on the tank called Raven's Blight that will cause them to explode in a small AoE for 2,000 to 5,000 damage after the debuff expires, approximately 10 seconds. This does damage to the tank again, so they will need another Stone Skin and Eloquium to reduce the damage. Also, anyone standing next to them will probably die. There's a lot of ways to handle this mechanic. We just had one tank handle the entire phase, rotating his cooldowns to survive everything with a Stone Skin plus Eloquium. Another way to handle it is to have your off tank provoke after the beak and let the main tank run away for the explosion. You can also have the off tank provoke just before Raven's Beak and let him take the hit and move away. Whatever works for your group. Darnus additionally has a move called Stardust. When used, either a red or yellow mark will appear above a single player's head. When the mark disappears, after a short delay, a meteor of the corresponding color will drop in that location, dealing about 1,000 raid-wide damage. Anyone under the meteor when it drops will take significantly more damage, likely killing them if they aren't a tank, so don't be there. After they hit, the meteors will remain on the ground for the remainder of this phase. If another meteor lands too close to them, the old meteor will explode and instantly wipe the raid. These meteors have no real significance in this phase, but they play a very important role in phase 2. I'll go over our exact placements for these when we get to that point. Darnus' next set of attacks will all come together. Darnus will do a Raven's Dive to a single target other than the main tank, dealing about 600 damage. He will then charge up Iron Chariot, which does damage in an AoE around Darnus and knocks nearby players back. At the same time, he will place a mark above a player's head. After he finishes Iron Chariot, he will use Thermionic Beam on the marked target, dealing about 15,000 damage to that person, split between all the people it hits. To counter this, everyone but the main tank stacks in the center of the room to split the damage while Iron Chariot is going out. After a Thermionic Beam, Darnus will jump back to the main tank with another Raven's Dive. Darnus also has Lunar Dynamo, which will deal damage in a donut around the boss, very similar to Diabolos' ultimate terror in the Lost City of Amdapor. This means standing right next to the boss is safe, and standing at maximum casting range is safe, but anywhere in between is basically a dead zone. Additionally, any target hit by Lunar Dynamo will heal the boss for the damage they receive, so it can prolong the already tight DPS check if you aren't careful. Watch your Summoner or Scholar pets from being hit by this too. And finally, the boss has Meteor Stream. Darnus will become untargetable and begin jumping on several marked players' heads for anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 damage. This damage happens in a small AoE around the player, so be sure to not be standing on top of each other when it hits. This attack will happen twice per boss rotation. The first time it will only occur once before the boss returns to the field. The second time it will happen twice, meaning some players may get Meteor Streamed twice. Those people need to be vocal and let the healers know that they are in immediate danger of death if they don't receive at least one extra heal. Additionally, after each set of Meteor Streams, Darnus will Dalamud dive back to the tank, dealing very high damage to them and anyone nearby, so no one stand near the tank. Those are all the mechanics for Phase 1, so here's what the boss's rotation will look like. The boss will start with a red Stardust, then Raven's Beak, then he'll do that Dive Chariot Thermionic Beam dive combo, then another Raven's Beak, a yellow Stardust, Lunar Dynamo, one Meteor Stream, Dalamud Dive, Raven's Beak, red Stardust, Meteor Stream twice, Dalamud Dive, Raven's Beak, yellow Stardust, the Dive Chariot Beam dive combo again, Stardust, another red one, Raven's Beak, Lunar Dynamo, one Meteor Stream, Raven's Beak, yellow Stardust, and two Meteor Streams. Optimistically, you want to push right around the time of the 5th Stardust coming out if you want to be on track for the Enrage timer, but this is the entire rotation regardless. Now before we go to talk about Phase 2, let's talk about meteor placements. We place them as you see in this diagram, with one red and one yellow grouped reasonably apart from each other as to not cause a wipe. We have one set at 2 o'clock roughly, one at 6 o'clock, and one at 10 o'clock. This is not the only method of doing meteors. We just use this because we tanked the boss at 12 o'clock, and there's plenty of room for melee to not need to travel far to drop meteors. Don't worry, we'll be bringing this diagram up again pretty soon. Phase 2 will begin at about 65% and is a time-based phase. You must deal with all of the mechanics with the time frames listed below, or you will likely wipe. You also will probably be lacking the DPS to beat the Enrage timer if you can't do it within the time limit as well. At 65%, the boss will become untargetable and form a mini Dalamud in the center of the room. At the same time, 3 green meteor marks will appear above 3 players' heads other than the healers. When these marks expire, after a short delay, 3 meteors will hit the arena at the same time, dealing about 600 damage each. After they hit, a Dalamud spawn will appear at the dropped location. From this point, you have 65 seconds to kill all 3 Dalamud spawns. Each golem has a different color and a different quote-unquote stance or maneuver. The blue golem will occasionally use the move Earth Shock, which will deal damage and paralyze everyone in the room. This attack can be silenced by a Bard, Paladin, or Selene pet, and it definitely must be. The blue golem also has magnetism, which sucks in any nearby players, meteors, or golems. It doesn't do any damage, but it can still be deadly if the blue golem is too close to another golem. It'll mean an instant wipe, and you'll see why in a little bit. The red golem has 2 moves at its disposal. Heavy Strike is very similar to Ballast from turn 2, where after it finishes charging, it will spawn 3 270-degree rings pulsing outwards from the spawn. Behind the red Dalamud spawn is the safe spot for Heavy Strike. He also uses Earthern Heart, which shoots a beam at a target location and places a bleed on whoever it hits, as well as placing an AoE circle on the ground that will deal damage to anyone standing in it. Do not get hit by the initial hit. It's gonna hurt. The green golem is your standard golem and does all the standard moves. This includes Stone Skull, which is a heavy-hitting single target ability, Boulder Clap, which is a heavy-hitting conal ability, and Demolish, which is a heavy-hitting AoE ability. This is the only golem that actually hits hard though, and I highly recommend whoever tanks this golem run defensive cooldowns. Every so often, the golems that are alive will switch stances with each other. Since their colors are RGB, aka red, green, blue, if all of them are alive, they should rotate in that same order. Red will become green will become blue, and blue will become red. If any golem dies, the 2 remaining golems will just switch with each other. On top of that, each golem has a few combined mechanics. The most important one is their ability to absorb meteors and even each other. They will absorb any meteor or golem that comes very close to them. If a golem absorbs a red meteor, they get a stacking damage buff, and if they eat a yellow meteor, they gain a stacking haste buff. Feeding these meteors can be a little finicky, as they need to be right on top of the meteors in order to absorb them. Also, feeding all of the golems at once can lead to some bad situations. For example, feeding a red golem a yellow meteor can cause his Earthern Heart to become undodgeable unless you're already moving when it goes out, or a red meteor being fed to the green one can cause Boulder Clap or Demolish to hurt the raid really bad. This takes some getting used to depending on your kill speed. Oh, and the most important thing, if a golem absorbs any other golem, they will merge and become a super golem with 10,000 HP per second regen, damage reduction, and damage dealt increased buffs. Basically, it's a wipe, so don't let it happen. This super golem will also spawn if you feed a single golem 4 meteors. We usually destroy the green golem before the first switch ever happens so that we only have red and blue golems left. One of our tanks picks up the green golems and feeds it immediately while running defensive cooldowns, while our other tank picks up the blue golem and our healer picks up the red one. I personally recommend having a bard tank the final golem, but whatever works for your group. I also think that, as a contingency plan, having the other tank pick up the red golem and your bard pick up the blue is much safer, since if you can't kill the green golem in time, the red golem will become green and potentially one-shot whoever was tanking it if it isn't a real tank. After we kill the green golem, everyone else just goes clockwise. Have a single bard watch the blue golem for Earthshock and be sure to wait and feed the remaining red golem any yellow meteors until after he does Earthen Heart. Go through all 3 golems and wait until the end of the 65-second time limit for the second half of Phase 2. Make sure you got rid of all those meteors, you're gonna need the space. Once 65 seconds are up, players will rapidly be marked with either red or yellow meteor marks. It doesn't seem to happen in any particular order, and you will always get a total of 6 marks. We basically have a point marked B, and we run to our places in either A, B, or C location, although it's not a true A, B, or C. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are actually the locations if you look at this diagram. Again, far from the only way to do this, just the way that we figured it out with our time on this fight. You will always get 3 red marks and 3 yellow marks during this, but as long as you know how to handle the golems, placing them in the red-yellow pairs isn't as important as just ensuring that they don't overlap and wipe the raid. Also, remember that each meteor is doing about 1,000 raid-wide damage, so be sure to pop a heal or 2 during this. After those 6 meteors drop, 3 more green meteor marks will be placed above people's heads again. We place them as seen in the diagram, with 1 in the center and 1 on each side of the arena, and everyone else hugs the north wall. After these meteors drop, you have about 80 seconds to kill all 3 golems again, and yes, you do have to feed all 6 meteors before the end of the phase. It's otherwise completely identical to the first set of golems once you've got them on the field, and we handle them in the same way. We burn the green down really quickly before the swap, then kill the remaining 2 in a clockwise order. A fun note, you can actually Lethargy Blizzard Stone to slow the golem's movement speed, or you can use Fluid Aura to knock them back. Fluid Aura can actually interrupt any of their moves, but it's pretty risky to use depending on where you're standing in the room. Also, I don't recommend slowing the golems on purpose, as it can make feeding those meteors a royal pain. After 70 seconds, Darkness will give the raid a warning that says 10 seconds until Mega Flare. You now have 10 seconds to ensure every meteor has been eaten and every golem is dead. Stoneskin plus Sucker plus Sacred Soil, whatever you have to do to reduce raid-wide damage here. When the countdown is finished, Darkness will use Mega Flare and deal approximately 5,000 to 6,000 damage to everyone before mitigations. They will likely kill any DPS or healer that doesn't have Stoneskin or Sucker, so ensure that everyone has these. Not much healing was needed in the phase prior after the green golem went down, so use that time to get Stoneskins up on everybody. If any meteor or golems were still left alive, it's an instant wipe. This marks the end of phase 2 of the fight, and the arena will change to designate that. Phase 3 now begins and will last until Darkness hits 47% HP, so only about 18% of the boss's HP. At the very start of the phase, Darkness will Dalamu dive to whoever had the highest aggro at the end of phase 1, so likely your main tank, so just stay away from him. He will then immediately greet you with the phase's main mechanic, Heavensfall. Heavensfall will summon a giant Allegan pillar in the center of the arena. When it hits, the damage it deals is proportional to your distance from the structure. About 60% between the wall and the structure is a pretty safe distance to stand. At this distance, you'll only take about 2,500 damage from the fall itself. It will additionally knock everyone towards the wall, so if you are too far from the center, it will instantly kill you by making you touch the wall. Again, 60% of the distance works well here. The structure itself also has a field around it that will instantly kill anyone who touches it. And finally, Heavensfall will do a pulsing move, where it will designate a pattern in the room and pulse out damage once, twice, or depending on whichever Heavensfall it is. There are a total of 3 Heavensfalls, and they will always happen in the same order. The first Heavensfall covers 2 areas opposite of each other in the room and pulses in the same location twice. These are always the northwest and southeast sides of the room as shown here. The second Heavensfall will cover 1 set of alternating areas first before switching to the previous safe areas. The final Heavensfall will have 2 areas on opposite ends and then travel either clockwise or counterclockwise around the arena, gaining speed as they approach their end rotation. That you never want to see that third set of Heavensfall. It likely means you may not be properly meeting the DPS check for the fight, and it's also just really annoying. So after the first Heavensfall, the boss will introduce a few new mechanics and get rid of most of his old ones. Darkness no longer has Stardust, Raven's Beak, or Raven's Claw. Instead, his basic attacks just hit harder, and he has a new attack called Bahamut's Claw. This stabs the tank multiple times per use, dealing high single target damage. He also has a new attack called Garrote Twist. This debuff lasts a little over a minute and will place stacks of Garrote on whoever is marked. Garrote stacks do nothing until the target reaches 9 stacks. At 9 stacks of Garrote, they will instantly be killed. This mechanic works alongside the next one I'm going to talk about. Darkness additionally summons a new ad, the Ghost of Mericidia. These ads hit like freight trains, so do not take them lightly. They have a single target tail whip which deals about 5,000 to 6,000 damage, auto attacks that can deal a couple thousands of damage, and they can spit a fire breath on the ground that ticks for about 1,500 damage. They're basically like a mini Twintanya. When the ad hits about 40 to 50% HP, they stop hitting whoever is tanking them and begin channeling Binding Chain, which will begin placing stacks of Garrote on 2 chained players. If the ghost is not killed before the channel completes, both of the chain targets will be instantly killed. When the ghost dies, it also does a giant AoE explosion that will likely kill anyone it hits, so don't get hit by it. The ghost also drops small circles of light near his dead body, a total of 3. These circles cleanse all negative status effects off anyone who steps in them. That of course includes Garrote Twist and Garrote. Reserve these circles only for players who receive Garrote Twist and have them cleanse it off immediately. After somebody steps in the circle, they will disappear, so only one person can step in each circle. These circles do also disappear after a short time, so be quick about it. The second Garrote Twist the boss shoots out will always come just before a heavensfall, so that person especially needs to be quick about cleansing and then not dying to heavensfall. After the first Ghost of Mericidia, you will get the second set of heavenfalls, which are the ones that do the damage in the alternating patterns. At the same time, Darkness will unleash his final mechanic for the phase, Supernova. He will shoot 2 black holes at random players other than the main tank called Supernovas. The initial damage doesn't do much at all, but it does leave behind black holes that, if stepped in, deal extremely high damage and place a movement speed slow on whoever they hit. Just avoid touching these things. You really want to get the boss to 47% at the same time as the second ad starts channeling Binding Chain. You absolutely do not want to deal with the third set of Heavensfall. Not only does it mean the DPS might be low, but that set of Heavensfall just really sucks. Organize this with your raid as best as possible, as you see us doing here. At 47%, the final phase of the boss begins, and it's going to test most of what you've learned up until now. Cleanse any remaining Garrote Twists and prepare yourself. At the start of the final phase, Darkness will cast Bahamut's Favor. This places a stacking buff on Darkness that will increase his damage done every time he uses Bahamut's Favor. This places a soft enrage over the already hard enrage. Too many stacks and his attacks will become extremely hard to deal with. Good news is, you'll probably wipe to the hard enrage before the soft enrage ever kills you. Bahamut's Favor additionally summons 3 dragons in semi-random locations along the outside of the room: Fireclaw, Iceclaw, and Thunderclaw. These dragons hold the primary mechanics for the final phase. Iceclaw will shoot an ice ball at a party member every 2 seconds, dealing about 200 damage and placing Ice Bitten on them. Ice Bitten lowers your resistance to further ice balls, so if another one hits you, it will deal about 8,000 damage. Don't worry, Iceclaw never shoots the same person twice in a row. He will always go through the entire party list before coming back to you, so you have about 16 seconds before it instantly kills you. Fireclaw, on the other hand, will place a tether on a random raid member. After a short delay, that random raid member will have a fireball shot at them that will do a small AoE around the target, dealing a couple hundred damage and placing Fire Scorched on a target, which operates similarly to Ice Bitten. If you get hit by it twice in a row, it instantly kills you. The most important thing to note is that these debuffs counter each other. For example, if you are Ice Bitten and you get hit by a fireball, it will remove the Ice Bitten debuff. It also works the other way around too. This is how you prevent the mechanics from one-shotting you. Thunderclaw's mechanic operates on its own. He will cast Thunderstruck on a target every 10 seconds. After 5 seconds, that target will explode and deal about 4,000 plus damage to anyone within range, as well as placing a super potent Paralyze on them. This damage and Paralyze does not affect the Thunderstruck target, so just have that person move out of the group. You will always get a total of 4 Fireballs and 4 Thunderstrucks for each Bahamut's Favor cast, and they will always alternate starting with the Fireball. We move the first fire out of the group, keep the second fire in to remove Ice Bitten from everyone, move the third fire out, and then keep the fourth Fireball in for the same reason as the second one. Depending on the Ice Ball RNG, players may want to watch their debuffs just in case they end up not actually needing to cleanse Ice Bitten from themselves to avoid them one-shotting themselves to an extra stack of Fire Scorched. Thunderstruck targets will always move out of the group. It's a small AoE, so you don't really need to move that far. There are plenty of other mechanics happening simultaneously as well. Right after the boss casts Bahamut's favor, he will use Bahamut's Claw 3 to 5 times on the main tank, which requires heavy healing and defensive cooldowns. You can also provoke swap mid Bahamut's Claw to split the damage between the two tanks, but a paladin running the right defensive cooldowns can eat the Claw alone pretty easily. Right after the first fireball, Darkness will Raven's dive to somebody and begin channeling Lunar Dynamo. For this, we stack in the center of the donut. However, a Thunderstruck will also go out at the same time, so everyone without Thunderstruck moves in front of the boss and the person with Thunderstruck moves behind the boss. This easily avoids both mechanics simultaneously. After 2 more fireballs and another Thunderstruck, Darkness will channel Iron Chariot again, so move out of it. He will also then mark 1 target for Thermionic Beam, mark 1 target as Thunderstruck, and begin shooting 3 supernovas at players. We move Summoner and Scholar Pets to the center of the room to help soak Thermionic Beam, while the Thunderstruck player moves someplace safe away from the group. As the second supernova is coming out, we begin collapsing on the center point to split the damage. After this, we get a fireball that needs to remain in the group to cleanse Ice Bitten, 1 last Thunderstruck will go out, a new Bahamut's Claw will go out, which we have the off-tank provoke and soak with his defensive cooldowns, and then the most annoying mechanic of the phase, Dive Bombs. I know some of you recognize that mark above our heads. That's right, Dive Bombs from turn 5 are back. Except now those 3 dragons from the outside of the arena are the ones responsible for them. This is by far the most difficult part of the fight and also probably requires the most movement. So, after our final Thunderstruck goes out, we move to the location you see marked as A. Around this time, a crosshair mark will appear above a random player other than the main tank's head. When the mark dissipates, 2 of the 3 dragons will swoop across the arena and use Cauterize, dealing several thousand damage and knocking anyone back, likely killing them. At the same time the mark disappears, several players will be marked for Meteor Stream, so be sure to not be standing on top of each other. Another crosshair mark will come out to designate where the 3rd dragon should dive, as well as another set of Meteor Stream marks. Your goal here is to place the first dive bomb mark, run to the other side of the arena, heal through the Meteor Stream, place the second mark, run to the other side, heal through the second set of Meteor Streams, and then you're good to go. Darkness will then come down with Dalamud dive, so avoid standing near the main tank as well. Now there is a very clear way to determine which 2 dragons will be part of the first dive, but it's not always easy to tell in the heat of the moment. As you can see in this diagram, there are 3 dragons outside of the arena. 2 of these dragons will always be the exact same distance from each other. Which 2 isn't ever the same, so it's not always fire and ice, it's not always fire and lightning. That is not the important detail. But 2 of them will be a little bit less than 120 degrees apart. These 2 always dive together. The final remaining dragon will be for the second set of dive bombs. However, there are situations where it's damn near impossible to tell how far apart the dragons are when the phase begins. So we do as follows. We look for the 2 dragons that seem farthest apart and set the first dive bomb spot next to the dragon between them. We mark the second spot, B, as the safe place to run, but depending on which dragons dive, we have the second marked player quickly run into a position that prevents the final dragon from running through the center of the room. This takes a lot of group awareness, but can make up for poor depth perception or geometry on the dragons. If you would like a more in-depth look at the possibilities of this method, please see the diagram Collision posted in their video, which I have linked in the description below. So for the first Bahamut's favor, here is the boss's ability rotation. He'll start with Bahamut's Claw, then a Fire Tether which you move out of the group, you'll get Thunderstruck plus Lunar Dynamo at the same time, then a Fire Tether that you keep in the group, a Thunderstruck, a Fire Tether that you move out of the group, Iron Chariot, Thunderstruck, which just has to be someplace safe, Supernova times 3, Thermionic Beam, a Fire Tether that's in the group, Bahamut's Claw again, Thunderstruck, got the dive bombs with the 2 double dragons, that mark will go out, then you have the 1 Meteor Stream, then you have the second dive bomb mark that'll go out, then you have another Meteor Stream, and then Dalamud dive, and it's over. After the final Dalamud dive, you'll have a short reprieve where the boss only attacks, before using Bahamut's favor again. This second Bahamut's favor is mostly identical to the first one. The only difference is in the dive bomb phase. When the first green mark goes out, handle it as if you would normally do so for favor number 1. Instead of Meteor Stream though, the boss will channel another Iron Chariot. At this point, the main tank should get to a safe spot depending on where the final dragon is and make sure nobody else is standing near them, usually someplace close to the center of the room. Darkness will Raven's dive to the main tank and then charge Lunar Dynamo. The tricky thing here is to get that person with the second mark into the Lunar Dynamo safe area before it goes off, so it can be a little bit random depending on the dragon's locations. We didn't do it successfully here, but since only I took the Dynamo hit, it was quite recoverable. Don't just give up when people die in this last phase. After that Dynamo and the second dive bomb, favor number 1's rotation will alternate again. So you will probably hit the enrage before you ever have to worry about doing another favor number 2 type rotation. Quickly, here is the rotation for the final part of favor number 2. Very simply, the mark for the double dive bombs will go out, the boss will channel Iron Chariot, then the mark for the second dive bombs will come out, then the boss will Raven's Dive, and then Lunar Dynamo will go out. With this information, you are hopefully well on your way to defeating Nail Deus Darnus. The boss always drops a single item level 115 weapon, a second piece of loot, 1 sand of time, and 1 oil of time. We got the sword and monk pants as our loot. That was what we got. If you are interested in seeing the entire fight play out from start to finish, there is a link for that from my perspective on the kill available in the description below. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, as well as follow me on Twitch where I do live stream occasionally. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.